The following is a transcript of a conversation between Matías De Stefano, referred to as me, and his higher self, referred to as I am. 29th October 2020, Sex and Sensuality. Me. If getting sick means stopping, when we are told to stop and contemplate, is that the spiritual way to get sick? I am. The human lives a busy life in which, in his eagerness to live, he runs wearing life out. Biological bodies have to ensure subsistence, live as long as possible, and for this it seeks energy to accumulate for times of scarcity. Thus, every day that you wake up, the body asks for food, asks to go out and look for it, asks for love and goes out to find it, asks to move forward and walks to the horizon. This is how the human builds life through spending it. In the same way that every time you breathe, you try to absorb as much oxygen as possible in a puff, devouring the air, without being aware that it is the same oxygen that precisely oxidizes your cells, corroding them until their degradation and death. Me. Another paradox of life. I am. If you eat life in bites, one day you will end up eating yourself, because you are life. For this reason, faced with the maelstrom of the need to live from the body, the spirit asks it to stop, to contemplate. The body understands detention as illness, but on a spiritual level, illness is called a crisis. From the Greek krisis, which gives rise to judgment and criticism, means decision. It is the turning point when you come from one path and it opens in two, and you must decide which one to take. The critical point breaks everything built and drives you to stop, to contemplate, plan, take notion of what has been traveled. Deciding is Libra's Achilles heel, and is in turn the disease of the spirit. Every crisis is the moment of rethinking, of decision. What do you hope to do from now on? It is a time to strip yourself of everything, to be able to move forward. Tell me, do you remember the next step after Mount Kailash? Me. Strip myself of everything. Mount Kailash for me was facing death. The alchemist, whom many call Merlin, accompanied me on that journey. It was a difficult road, crossing it 7,000 meters high with almost nothing and less experience. Several times I felt like I was dying, but I didn't stop. There I had a moment of major crisis. Shiva spoke out, reminding me that I cannot take charge of the world, that I cannot take responsibility for destruction and death, for they are part of the cycle of life. I always wanted to help so that bad things do not happen. And there, at that turning point, the mountain explained to me that it is the destruction that had created it, that it was destruction that originated the beautiful ecosystems that I enjoy today, the landscapes that amaze us, the species that inhabit Earth. Without destruction, there is no creation. I came down different, transformed, with the calm of knowing that you cannot stop the destruction that comes, what was happening in the following years, that is now 2020 and the things that will come. But I understood that you can do different things, that you can use that destruction to evolve, to create and transcend, to improve. When I got down, Merlin told me, I wait for you in 7 days at the end of the Land's End in England. So I did. I went from Tibet to Nepal, and from there to England. Arriving at Land's End, he led me to a small circle of stones called Buscawen Un and said, get rid of everything. He made me take off my clothes, and I stayed in my underwear. And he said, everything. There I had a crisis. Shame. I am very embarrassed, modest with the body. I always felt uncomfortable with it. He made me undress in front of the rock and present myself as I was, being myself. He said, make your way. Now is your time to be the alchemist. Become me. That was the last time I felt him in the next 14 days when I toured alone all of England and Scotland, going only to the stone circles from south to north. In that moment I felt a crisis, a moment of bewilderment in which I felt stripped of everything, as I was born, facing shame, the fear of showing myself as I am. For 14 days I did the same thing in various places, whether it was hot or cold, and I began to feel a strange sacred energy in sexuality that involved the ritual of stripping myself of everything. To begin to lose shame is no longer to lose it, but to gain confidence. Then I remembered what in ancient civilizations they made us do to break the barrier that separated us from others: sex. Since childhood sexuality was practiced because it was known that at age 12, a man and a woman could have a child, and then it was necessary to understand what sex was, which was not something alien, strange, taboo, but something natural and useful in life. They made us recognize our bodies, the limits and extremes, where the pain and pleasure were. Women thus learned to give birth with orgasms instead of suffering. Nudity implied confidence in oneself and in the other, awakening strength and weakness at the same time, making them all men and women as one. There were no shames, no dependencies, nothing to hide. It was the first time I danced naked freely in a circle of stones as our ancestors did. It was the first time I was not ashamed to be stripped of my clothes, my personality, in front of strangers. I felt like I was reborn. I am. Sex comes from sectus, which means to separate. In ancient times, the two paths in front of you were called man and woman, and their clear differences were what separated them as different beings. So their genitals were known as their sexes, and the interaction between their genitals would be known as sexual act. Sexuality, then, is the attribute of separation. However, in today's culture, you have given it a wrong connotation because they confuse it with sensuality, me. And what is sensuality? I am. It is the ability to perceive with all the senses. It is the sensory ability: hearing, taste, vision, touch, and smell. The tone of voice, the words used, the singing, the intense breaths are a sensory delight for the ear. The flavors, the food, the aphrodisiac, the kisses, the sensitivity of the lips and the tongue are a delight for the taste. The shapes, the colors, the symmetry, the depth of the gaze are a delight for the eyes. Caresses, rubbing, heat, chills, tickling, massage are a delight to the touch. And the aromas, perfumes, sweat, pheromones, and testosterones emanating from the skin and hair excite and delight the smell. Sensuality is the illumination of the senses. Each of them is the basis of one of the elements of nature: earth touch, water taste, air hearing, fire vision, ether smell. And in turn, they represent the universal codes that manifest all reality: hexahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron, tetrahedron, and octahedron, respectively. If vibrational geometry is the universal language of spirit and mind, with its patterns being the elements of nature, the realms, the energy in motion, that is, of the soul, which manifests in physics, then the five senses are the way in which the spirit and soul can receive with full consciousness the information of their creation. Sensuality goes far beyond sex and reproduction, as it involves communication with the soul and spirit through the senses of the body. The ancients taught that the only way to learn to communicate with the spirit was through sensuality, having full awareness of the body, losing shame, opening up to perception with oneself and with others. And within all this, what separates us, sex, becomes a way of feeling, of recognizing other parts, of uniting the different. Me. Sex and sensuality, then, are two spiritual concepts. That is, it is the spirit that has designed them to be able to feel and receive the information of matter. I am. And so, Merlin told you that until you accept your nudity, your body, your sexuality and sensuality, you could not become a magician like him, because you would always be blocking the spirit in its will to live. Me. I understand. It makes sense now. Sexuality is something that for many years has been forbidden and is still done in many cases. There is still a lot of discussion about sexual issues, attributing them to what holds us on, what keeps us as animals, what distances us from spirit and purity, and is taken as something negative, provocative, or that diverts us from the way or path of light. In many cases, abstinence is spoken of as a way, or the only way, to connect to the spirit. What do you say about that? I am. That never would such a rich universe design the diversity of existence to say that there is only one way to find the spirit. especially a spirit that is not found anywhere because it inhabits all things. The only way to find the spirit is not through method, but through coherence and harmony. If you meet these two requirements, everything else will bring you into your being, into your spiritual essence. Me. So, in a time as turbulent as this, of a constant struggle over sexuality, about gender diversity, about feminism, everything generates a conflict that will lead us to spiritual illness, to the crisis that will make us stop and see where we have come, and how much we have mentalized concepts that are not ideological but sensory. And there we will return to the essentials. Gender ideology is not an ideology, it is a sensation. And therefore, we must learn to feel, to perceive with the five senses without mental judgments, knowing that beyond diversity, we are all sensory beings connecting with the essence of who we really are, beyond the genitals, that is, through the senses. I am. Sexuality and sensuality may seem like opposite concepts now that you think about it after this analysis. However, the one and the other feed each other. In Tantra, the doctrine of learning to use the senses as a way to communicate with spirit, sex is a fundamental part of communication. The breath ignites the kundalini, vital energy, which is reinforced by looks and aromas, which through touch is potentiated, and with singing is harmonized. The use of the vital and generative force of the genitals encourages the rise of the vibration that awakens the brain sensors to perceive with the most acute senses. To re-relate to healthy sexuality is not a matter of spiritual idea, but of allowing oneself to awaken one's sensuality, not in relation to others, but the ability to feel for oneself, with oneself. Me. To exalt my senses, to become sensory, is to awaken my sensuality. I am. And sexuality will be one more tool in the task of joining the spirit here and now. Me. I free myself from my shames to allow myself to feel, and thus unite body, soul, and spirit.